All right. So we're talking about um, PASA, the point of contact, and how do we get to contact? What do we do with it? And how did we get there? That basically looking at. All right. So as we have sense contact, that sense contact, which is sanya, and it is also correctly translated actually as consciousness, though that there are actually two kinds of consciousness that we'll talk about. The first kind of consciousness is sense contact. That means the kind of seeing that is actually seeing. For
Hmm.
instance, you see the screen. All right. You know that it's there. You know the difference between the screen being on and off. How do you know that? It's because you've got that information stored. When
Yeah.
there's someone on the screen, you either recognize them for their face or perhaps the way they're dressed, or the same way with someone coming up to you that you want to find out or figure out who they are. You want to recognize something about them. If you don't know anything about them, then we're in a state of confusion. In other words, we process and we come up with nothing. We don't
Yeah.
know who they are. What that brings up is curiosity. But for some people, it will bring up doubt, confusion, and even fear. If I don't know who you are, you must be dangerous.
Hmm.
Okay. So this is the kind of thing that happens, but we can also recognize who they are based upon the kind of clothing that they wear because we've got all kinds of clothing built into our database, our pattern recognition. So
Sure.
we recognize, for instance, brown shirts versus blue shirts. We recognize the difference between a police uniform and the FBI uniform and no uniform at all, etc., like that. We have all of that data stored in so that we can help to identify what it is that we see. So if we identify something, what that means, the identification then is the second kind of consciousness. In the Pali, it's called the Salayatana. And what that means is that we take the actual image, we add to it through the process of perception to come up with um, an understanding. All right. So this
Yeah.
is what we mean by the word recognize, except that we're not. Yeah, okay. So we recognize, which means that we're bringing stuff out of the past and refitting it with the new information now so that we can recognize what's going on. What does recognize mean? We've seen it before. We recognize it. All
Yeah.
right.
So we
That
have
might be
these.
a mistake,
Yeah.
but that's the way we do it. We might think we recognize something to where in fact we're making something up. We're wrong. We do not recognize what's going on. We think we do because what we see fits in with our own old database.
Yeah.
You had a
So
question.
yeah, I was just going to clarify. So you were saying we have two types of consciousness. We have like the sense consciousness, and then the salayatana type of consciousness.
Hmm.
In that salayatana, that's like our um, that's like the mental object, or I don't, well, maybe not mental object, but that's like the
Uh-huh.
mentalizing that we do to
Hmm.
be like, like I know what that is. That's like a doctor in a lab coat, versus
Right.
like the sense consciousness, which is like more raw input related.
Hmm. All right. So in fact, that sense consciousness that we're talking about at one step is just the bare seeing, hearing without understanding.
Yeah.
The understanding comes because we have processed it into something that we recognize or that we understand.
Hmm.
Okay. We use the word realize, but
Hmm.
this is just a convention. We don't realize anything.
Yeah,
We mentalize.
we mentalize it. We come up with what we think it is.
Right. And that's not realization at all, though we
Yeah,
use that kind of word,
that's
that
true.
in fact it might be incorrect. quite often it's incorrect, that we realize something that was incorrect, that we cognize, but we don't cognize so that it actually, when we realize something, the reality that we realize is not real.
Yeah, it
Okay.
doesn't actually match what's below it.
This is why the Buddha was so big on investigation. We need to keep taking stuff out of the senses and keep plugging that in.
Mm.
Okay, rather than taking one time, take in input, process it with all we know, and get an output. What we need to do is bring input, process a little bit, and come up with something that's closer to what's out there rather than what is in our own mind.
Yeah, that would make sense. The more
Okay,
input you have, the more closely it would match.
the closer it's going to match, exactly. Um, that's done in all kinds of sciences. Even in computer science, the basic search is a binary search. You can't just look one time and see the data. You look and you see, oh, well, the thing that I found is lower than what I'm looking for. So let me go look in between. Okay, and
Yeah.
try to, and so we have to look several times in that binary search before we actually find either that the item is there or it's not.
Mm.
Okay, but in fact, to find out that it's not, more investigation than to find out that it's there. You might be
Yeah.
lucky and just find it. But if you don't find it, that means you have to keep narrowing your search down to where it's not here and it's not here and there's nothing in between. Because these are two addresses in the computer that's side by side, or you got this name on the list. Well, let us say you have Adams followed by Connor, right there in the database, there's no Baker. And so we recognize there's no Baker because we saw both Adams and Connor in a row, and we know this data is in alphabetical order. So what I'm saying is in the mind, it quite often is we do not see or recognize what it is. And so most likely the human mind will just grab something that's wrong to make it fit.
Yeah.
Okay. This is what we call delusional thinking. That we're
And
not looking at what's going on. We will take anything because it fits with something we already know.
because we're just kind of making up things based on like very little
We
information.
make
We're
stuff up.
assuming. Yeah.
We make it up. Okay. So, what comes out of the Salayatana is either fairly close to reality or sometimes it's way far away from reality.
Hmm.
Um, and we can do that in the sense of reading someone's email. And they may use a word in that email that triggers us, the reader. It triggers that the word that the writer wrote triggers the reader in a way that that word that the writer wrote is being mis or translated or misunderstood by the reader, and therefore the reader is going to have a salayatana that is different from the input. This is another example of it. So quite often the salayatana does not fit our internal representation, or we're not seeing things clearly or correctly. But
Yeah.
whatever it is that we come up with is going to impact us.
Hmm.
Okay. And that quite often what we pull out of our database uh, may lead us incorrectly to making the wrong decisions that have to do then with when that thing impacts us, then we have feelings that are really inappropriate to the situation.
Hmm.
That's quite often the case that we will come up with anger as the result of the situation, but that the situation that we created in the mind was not the real situation. An example of that is when we recognize someone coming that's got brown clothes on. We immediately then, because we've seen it on television and heard all about Germany and brown shirts and all of that, And so we think because this guy's dressed in brown that he must be a brown shirt and that he's fascist or Nazi, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
All right. And so by the time he gets to the door, I've already got my gun out.
Yeah, because you've made that
Because I,
assumption based on your limited information.
because of based upon wrong limited information that we have inside. So once that impacts us, then feelings arise.
Hmm.
The feelings that are rising at this kind of situation is ignorant feelings based upon ignorant processing, getting wrong information, okay? And that one of the things that happens quite often is that people will misperceive in the sense that the data that they come in is actually benign. Most data, in fact, almost all the data that comes in through the senses is benign, but by the time we process it into dangerous.
Hmm.
And then we'll have the feelings based upon danger,
Yeah.
right?
So
Okay, so
we
there's
have
that
this.
ignorance
Yeah.
that is coming in at that point of contact. Actually, the ignorance was before that, but the feelings that are associated with that contact. Now, here's something that's quite interesting to understand that the point of contact that the Buddha is talking about, this Pali word pasa, actually can have various degrees of power behind them. But that one of the ways of understanding it is that this contact is not just a touch or a rub, it's a shove. All right.
Oh,
That
this contact's not a touch or a rub; it's a shove.
it's a shove. It's a
Okay.
contact. It's a collision.
Okay.
Okay. It's the very way of contact that a firing pin will hit the center point of the cartridge. It's that kind of contact, right? Do
Hmm.
you know what I mean by that?
It's sudden and
If
instant.
that firing pin hits that cartridge center point, it's going to cause a very tiny little explosion inside there.
Hmm.
And in what the what do you call it? The thing that sets off an explosion is actually just a tiny little explosion.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So
and
the thing
so
that
then
sets it off is a
that
tiny little
tiny little
explosion.
explosion then is the contact, and the firing pin that hits it, that's the contact. And
Yeah.
now the shell goes off. All of the gunpowder inside that shell then is set on fire.
Hmm.
That's the feeling. Sending out a projectile, and what the projectile that's going out is I want it or I don't want it. Okay, that's the point of tanha. Once the bullet strikes its object, then that's full on upadana.
Hmm.
That's the clinging. That, in other words, now the bullet that got that initial contact from the firing pin would be then the bullet going out and now hitting its target, which means now it's mine. This is upadana.
Hmm.
Okay, all of that is really ignorant because of that point of contact is the time that we have a chance. In other words, if that firing pin does not hit that center point, then the bullet's not going to go off.
Yeah, that would make
Okay,
sense.
so um, let's look at the point that generally what happens in real life is that it's only after the clinging happens, only after the bullet strikes its target, do we wake up.
Hmm.
And sometimes not even then.
Yeah.
A good example is when a man and his wife are arguing. Some point in that argument, one of them will storm out of the room or maybe just leave.
Yeah.
I got to go and buy. What that means is that someone in that argument has woken up. They woke up to the fact that this argument is ridiculous. No one is getting anything out about it. I love this lady. Why am I yelling at her?
Yeah,
You know?
hopefully. Yeah,
Pardon?
hopefully that's the realization. Or like, yeah, if they're storming out.
Pardon?
Oh, sorry, I was just saying, like, yeah, hopefully that's their realization if they're storming out of the house or anything like that.
Right, because if there's no wake up, there's going to be violence. And when there's no wake up, even after that, there's going to be real damage, perhaps
Yeah.
death.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how soon can we wake up?
So how soon
And
can we wake up in the process
how
between
soon
like
can we
where
wake
the
up?
firing
All
pin
right.
goes off and where it hits contact, or
Pardon?
between the firing pin going off and then
Well,
it like
actually,
colliding, or like this is
in
after?
this kind of reality of that argument, we're talking about a long period of time, maybe 15, 20, 30 seconds.
Hmm.
And any time in that time, the person can, in fact, wake up. Here's another example of that. I just had a student that said that he almost had an accident,
Mm-hmm.
that the traffic was there, and he recognized that the traffic was there, and so he swerved. And by
Yeah.
swerving away, he was able to manage not having that accident. And my
Mm-hmm.
question is, how did you get to the point to where you were approaching traffic, stop traffic in the road, that you had to swerve? Why didn't you see it a long time ago? Why didn't you wake up earlier so that you could gently put on your brakes and do things correctly? You only had to swerve because, number one, you did wake up, but number two, you woke up late.
Uh, because I guess maybe what we're cultivating this skill where like we're trying to wake up, and so maybe we only have developed the awareness like later in that process, closer to the collision.
Right. So most people, the ordinary people, wake up really late.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's like
Sometimes
when
they don't
things are
wake
on
up at
fire, they're
all.
like, oh gosh, something's gone wrong.
Hmm.
But you're talking about your student, he woke up, he had to swerve, but at least he avoided collision.
Right. He did wake up. If he hadn't woke up at all, he'd have crashed into that uh, the car or the traffic or whatever. But he woke up. But he woke up late, and
Yeah.
because he woke up late, the let us say the physical dynamics of the vehicles was such that the only way to avoid the accident was by swerving.
Yeah.
All right. But if he had woke up earlier than that, he wouldn't have had to swerve. He could have gently brought the car to a stop.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're getting at. With Paticca Samuppada, the teaching is, how soon can we wake up? What
Ideally
when
as close to that point of contact as possible, right? Or before the point of contact. Before,
Let us say that that's a good target point for waking up.
yeah.
Okay, that when we become really good at it, we can wake up even sooner than that. But we'll get into that in a moment.
Okay.
Okay, so um, generally, when we start to getting past, in fact, this is an important point about why suttas they talk about doing paticca samuppada both forward and in reverse order. It's done in forward order so that we can understand the cause effect relationships. We see the cause, we see the effect, we see the cause, we see the effect. Once we understand that intellectually, we begin to practice paticca samuppada in reverse order. Why
See
do
the
we
effect.
practice it in reverse order is because when we start practicing, we're fairly slow. We're not picking up things very quickly. We're not seeing things very clearly. But as we progress from this is full-blown dukkha
Mm-hmm.
back into this is a woeful state, back into I am becoming woeful or I am creating a self because of this clinging. That if I wasn't clinging, there would be no me here.
Yeah.
Okay, now the next step above that is that if I don't want it, then I'm not going to cling to it. In other words, if the projectile never leaves the barrel, then the target is not going to be hit. The
Hmm.
grasping and clinging is not going to be there if we don't want it.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're getting to the point of what causes the wanting and what is the power behind this wanting and grasping and clinging, the feelings that come up based upon the power of the contact.
Yeah. So there's like an intensity behind that contact.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, I guess there would have to be an intensity and a quality to the contact. And then that would
Exactly.
result in
So it is quite
particular. Yeah.
possible. Not only is it possible, but it's the most common kind to where the input that we have is processed and comes up with a realization that is mediocre, nothing to it. The contact is very, very lightweight, no impression at all, which
Hmm.
means we have no feelings much at all.
Yeah.
All right. So in the Pali Canon, they talk about feelings of liking, feelings of not liking, and feelings of what they call neither liking nor not liking. In fact,
Yeah.
in the Pali itself, it talks about dukkha vedana, sukha vedana, and dukkha sukha vedana.
Is that middle one like confusion or like not knowing?
That's the one that's confusion. We don't know whether we fully like it or we fully don't, but it does have an impact. That in
Okay.
fact, the stronger the impact it is, the closer to the feeling that you could associate with words like, what the hell?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if this is like in the context of, sometimes it feels like feelings oscillate between like, I like it, I don't like it. Is that kind
Hmm.
of a confusion? Would that be like
It
a,
can, in fact, that can oscillate back and forth between I like it, I don't like it, I like it, I don't like it, I don't know whether I like it or not, but I
okay, so it's
sure
like a
don't
confusion, it's
like
like,
that I
like, I
don't
don't know
like
which,
it.
yeah, so cool. Yeah,
I
so the
sure
point,
don't like this state of confusion that I'm in.
mhm.
There's many, many examples of that. In the sense that, let us say that you were a tribal lord in the desert, and that you were sitting on a mesa or a high cliff, and you saw a lone figure coming in, basically in this direction, coming up the valley. All right. If you do not recognize that person, if you're not sure of who they are, how are you going to feel?
Maybe scared.
Exactly. If you recognize them, you can actually recognize that he is a friend or he is a foe. But if we don't know who they are,
Oh, it'd be
we don't
uncertain.
know
Yeah.
whether he's friend or foe. Okay, so therefore, that kind of feeling is actually quite a powerful feeling,
Yeah.
right? If he is a friend and you know he's a friend, you may just sit up there on the mesa. If he's a foe and you recognize him as a foe, you may sit up there on the mesa, take your gun out, and shoot him. That's easy to do. If you don't know who he is, now there's a lot of work to be done. I've got to go find out who he is.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Get closer or like see who it is or like hide or something like that.
Mhm. Now, all of this is done ignorantly,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's based upon the fact that I'm a warlord and
Okay.
all of the stuff that goes with that. Okay, so that's where the Sankara comes in. The Sankara is I've already decided, and I'm calling myself a warlord.
Sankara, yeah, the context is like, I'm a
This
warlord.
is the
I see this
context that I
person
am the
approaching.
warlord. Who is this?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're always seeing things in the sense of being selfish.
Hmm.
So that means that this sankara that we have built up actually will influence sometimes the internal image that we come up with. That in fact the person may not be dangerous at all. It
Yeah.
may be a friend, we just don't recognize him yet.
Okay. Oh, and the ignorance that you're talking about, you're not talking about like the first, like, you're not talking about the ignorance that comes before like volatile action. You're just talking about, our brain has tried to do some like lookup on these like sensory inputs, and it's determined we don't know who this is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like not the ignorance that's like at the bottom of the
Mm-hmm.
DO chain.
So at this point of wisdom, we would do, if we had wisdom at the point of contact, the thing that warlord will do is sit there and watch.
Sit there and watch. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because it'd
look,
be like, we need more input, like you don't
investigate.
need
We
to
need
feel a
more
certain way
input.
about this. Yeah.
Uh-huh. That's the wise way to do it, is to take more input rather than assume that because we don't know who it is, he's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're beginning to understand about the feelings that we have when they're ignorant. They will take us in the direction of clinging, and when we get into a state of clinging, the quality is, and this is a good example for people to understand about it, that clinging has the quality that there is a cling or, as well as that which is clung to. Or
Oh,
another way of talking about it is that if you have the quality of clinging, that means that it is owned now.
yeah. You've said I need that. So there's like a
Right.
separate
Okay, so
that.
that's
There's a
what the
separate
I
me.
is created. The I is created as the owner,
Mm-hmm.
and the owner is the owner of this object. Not only is he dangerous, but he's dangerous to me.
Yeah. There's that. Like, I don't want to get hurt. Like,
Hmm.
so I need to defend myself from that.
So this is where the selfishness comes up. The selfishness comes up because of the ignorant way that we manage our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And the feelings themselves may be ignorantly based.
Yeah.
But if we have mindfulness, we can, um, depends upon the point where that mindfulness kicks in this process, because we're talking about something that happens fairly quickly in the mind.
Yeah.
All right. So let's use an example of anger and go back to the example of the man and his wife are having an argument. All right. And he's a Dhamma dude. So the argument gets started and she goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And she goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he says, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We don't need this. And now wisdom has come up. It didn't come up right when the argument started, but the wisdom, or he woke up fairly soon after the argument started. It only
Yeah.
got two interchanges, and then he woke up.
Yeah.
Okay. The next time, but before that, in fact, the way that normal people would live is that even if the mother-in-law came into the room while the husband and wife were fighting, and she said something like, "Look at what you're doing. Why are you guys fighting?" They may, in fact, continue fighting. That wasn't enough. So delusions are there. In other words, we already so wrapped up in the feelings. We got so much contact going that even when someone else brings a point of wisdom in, we ignore it. We throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them will look at mother-in-law and say, "We're not fighting. We're not. I'm not angry." Okay. And we hear that a lot, especially an example would be in a bar, having a bar fight. And the guy
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, but I'm not angry," and they're very angry when they say that. All right, so the first quality is that there is no waking up. The second quality then is that when somebody says, "Oh, you're angry," you can say, "Yeah, and I don't want to be." So now I wake up. The third time is, can you wake up on your own? Can you get it a little faster?
Mm-hmm.
Then the next one is when you wake up before you ever say anything. As soon as I wake up, or as soon as I become angry, before I ever say anything, I'll catch it. And now I'm working on the anger on the inside. And what we would say here, and in fact, every time that the student wakes up, whether he's already deeply into it or just about to start it, the same thing is always done, and that is shut your mouth.
Yeah.
If you're angry, shut up.
Yeah,
And
you
you're only
could
going to show. Pardon?
you could notice the feeling. You'd be like, this is a bad feeling. I can
Once
shut
we
up.
recognize that we're angry, the first thing we do is we want to shut up.
Yeah. Or I guess if we noticed we were angry, would we be noticing at the like I want it stage? Would we be noticing at Tanha? If we were like,
Well,
oh, I
that,
know that I'm angry. This is
there's
like
a
a little
lot
bit more
going on.
complex than
Whatever
like,
it'll take, there's a lot going on. So whatever it takes to wake you up, that's the
okay.
thing. Can you wake
Yeah.
up to recognize that you're doing something you don't really want to be doing?
Yeah.
And so when we do that, we can shut up.
Yeah. That'd
And
be
the
the
best time to do
wise
it
action.
is to recognize that I'm angry and to shut up before I ever open my mouth.
Yeah.
That generally is hard to do. So what will happen then is maybe we'll shout one time, like somebody steps on your foot, or some event happens and you have one word like "ouch" or "hey" or something like that. And that's when the wake up comes, almost immediately after. And so no more will come after that.
Yeah.
All right. This is where, in fact, they have the idea for Sotapan having 7 lifetimes, in the sense that if the Sotapan is angry, or the individual, we'll talk about it in a second, if he can come to the point to where that anger is only kept on the inside and he doesn't let it out at all, that's not a birth. But if he says one word, then that's the first birth. The second thing that he says, after he says ouch or whatever, and then he'll say, "Why don't you watch where you're going?" Now that's the second one. Okay.
Yeah.
In the tradition of the Buddha, that the Sotapan will eventually wake up before he's done this thing 7 times.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. By the time we go into the argument and we've said 7 things, that's about the time to shut up, to figure out that this is not where we want to go.
Yeah.
But if he can, in fact, when the anger comes, to not let it out at all, then this is what we call the non-returner, or the anagami. In other words, the anagami will still have anger, but he won't let it out. He's sharp.
And by not let it out, you don't mean suppress. You don't mean bottle it up.
I do
There's some
not
sort
mean
of like
suppress. Exactly. That's where
internally express.
that is so funny that in the Western society, the psychological organizations, the whole um, let us say faculty student body of all of psychology, made a horrendous mistake back in the 1970s. And then that whole idea about suppression of feelings got public, so that now everybody knows about suppression of feelings. Okay?
Oh, I
But
mean,
let's talk about suppression of feelings for just a bit. Go ahead.
by suppress, I just mean like this probably answers is like okay, yeah, I don't know. Say like me and my girlfriend get in a fight or something, and I choose, or before we get in a fight, I choose not to say something. But then like I don't
But you stand there and
actually,
feel
but I
bad. You want to say
stew
something.
on it
Right.
over and over. Like I'm
Okay.
not actually, you know, I'm not actually handling that skillfully. Like that's what I mean
So
by
the word,
suppress.
exactly. So this word suppression of feelings only means that you're holding those feelings, but you're not expressing them.
Yeah.
All right. We're not talking about that. We're talking about waking up to feelings.
Okay, we wake up to the feeling, we
Right.
express it in a
We,
skillful manner,
and we stop expressing it
or we
because
stop
we woke
expressing
up
it.
to it.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
then okay.
That in fact, when we wake up to it, that means at that point we now have a choice. When we are asleep, we're just
Okay.
going to go through the habit. But if
Yeah.
whenever we wake up, now we've got a choice about what we're going to do with our feelings.
Yeah, I'm assuming that it has to be expressed. And you're saying we can wake up, it doesn't have to be expressed. We don't have to. get into
Don't
that
have
light.
to suppress it. We don't have to express it. We don't have
Yeah.
to do either one of those things.
Yes.
Now, what happened in the 1970s was there was a whole group of stuff that was coming out about this. It got started with Fritz Perls. I know you probably haven't heard about him. He was a very, very famous psychiatrist and spent a lot of time at Esalen Institute in California, very famous place. Uh, and Fritz Perls had a concept of an empty chair, to where the therapist is sitting in one chair, the client was sitting in another chair, and the third chair was left there empty for the client to project their nemesis onto. All right. The nemesis at this point may be mom. It may be sister. It may be the boss. It may be the wife. Whoever it is, that's the talk therapy session that Fritz Perls invented. It took one step then for this become arguing or telling off the individual in the empty chair into getting a pillow out and bashing a pillow to get the anger and the frustration out. This led to a whole industry that one of the words they use, encounter group.
Encounter group?
Encounter groups, to where the therapist will get a whole group of people and then encourage them to make enemies of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so
encourage them to make enemies of each other? So
yeah,
they try to get mad
basically.
at each other? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Sounds like a bad idea.
It was. They even went so far as to have an industry of equipment, sports equipment, batons, boxing gloves, all knee pads, big face equipment that look. These therapy sessions wound up looking like a boxing ring.
Yeah, it sounds like rugby with more steps.
And they found what was going on, and when they recognized what was really happening, they put a stop to it. You don't see any encounter groups anymore. I don't think there's been an encounter group in 40 years.
See what they just thought it was healthy to express that stuff?
Well, here was what was happening. That people would go to these encounter groups, and then they would go home, or they would bash the pillow, being angry at mom. They would go home and they'd beat up everybody in the family.
Yeah, that's not good. It's very misguided.
That the psychotherapists were encouraging violence. They were encouraging anger. But that's where the idea came from about suppression. Don't suppress your anger. The answer is, if I don't, if I don't suppress it, their only option was to let it out and express it. Either suppress it or express it.
Yeah. There's
But in neither case are they going to the right thing and say, look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because if you're actually looking at what you're doing and recognizing that you actually do feel bad, you're just not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So let's do something about it now. Once we wake up to that and we see, let us go back to that point of anger, that we recognize that I'm angry, but I haven't said anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that I can do when I wake up with that, I can congratulate myself. Now we go right into Anapanasati. This is wake up time. Wow, am I so glad I didn't open my mouth.
Yeah.
All right. Wow, am I so glad that I opened my mouth is now not the same feeling as I had a minute ago of being angry at someone. Now I'm happy that I didn't pursue that anger.
Yeah, we've changed our context.
Now you're
that we're
beginning to
operating out
see
of.
how the wisdom operates. Wisdom is the point of contact. In other words, when we see that anger coming up, we can be glad that we see it.
Mm-hmm.
Another one we can go for would be, in the sense of Anapanasati, is having the right attitude of the winner. In the sense of not just gladdening the mind, wow, I'm glad, but the other one, the next step would be, I'm in control I don't have to. I'm really pleased with myself that I do not have to pursue anger.
Yeah, there's an end to
I'm the
suffering.
champion here. I'm the guy who's running this feeling mechanism, and
Yeah.
I can choose to feel the way that I want to feel, and I'm very happy. Down to the point of even say that I'm strong and proud of myself because I don't actually scratch that itch.
Yeah. And so we're changing what our like um sense consciousness at that point. Like we're adding things to the stack, like we're saying like we're having these mental objects, like these thoughts that are like getting fed back into our sankara, or I don't know if that's right, but like into our context that we're operating of, like how we're generating these mind objects or like these mentalizations,
Mm-hmm.
um, that would then be different than just being stuck in that, like being not woken up, just being like that warlord or that angry person. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yes, yes, yes. So I wake up to the recognize, okay, we could do that too. We can recognize that the person that we're angry at, we're not really deeply all of that angry at.
Yeah.
All right. An example of that would be the child is having a tantrum in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
What's mom going to do about the child with the tantrum in the grocery store? If she handles it unwisely, she'll freak out. She doesn't want anybody in the grocery store to know that she's a bad mom with a screaming brat on her hands.
Yeah, she'll be like ashamed that the kid's acting
Uh-huh.
out. She'll just try
And
to
so
quiet him, appease
I've
him.
seen several different really strange behaviors. But a wise thing to do would be when there's let us say that we're in the cereal aisle. Mom, if she was really wise, she wouldn't take that the grocery cart with that little chair. If the child is sitting in that chair, she wouldn't go into the grocery into that cereal aisle with that child because she knows that it's being set up.
Yeah.
You know, take the child through the vegetable department, but don't take a child to the grocery to the Fruit Loops and the candied cereals that the child has seen advertised on television. So now the lady is in that grocery aisle with her child, and the child is, I want, I want, I want, I want.
Mm-hmm.
If the mom is wise, she will give the child what the child wants and says, okay, you can hold this box of cereal while we're in the store. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, she starts making a deal with the child to put off the tantrum that the child is having right now. You can carry these Fruit Loops or these Tony Tiger cornflakes. You can carry them with you. You can hold them all in the store, but when we check out, the cereal box stays in the store. Is that okay? That's exactly the same thing with the child watching television or playing with their cell phone. Instead of saying, put your cell phone down, it's time to go to sleep, we can say, okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah. And so that would be more skillful in
So,
that we're gonna
okay,
be
so we
producing a
begin to
better
work with
positive.
things with
Yeah.
skillfulness because we know about these feelings. See, not only do we have to have wisdom at the exact point of contact when the feelings come up,
Yeah. Yeah.
tomorrow I can know that this sequence of events is about to happen and I can plan on it in advance so I don't have to go
Uh,
all the way to that point of contact where those feelings get all arising. That we
that
can
makes sense. So you're saying like we can, if we're awake, then we could look at like, today is a Wednesday and I know I have these meetings and these meetings will get me like worked up and kind of like angry or whatever.
mhm,
So I don't know, maybe I could do like jumping jacks or whatever to like keep my, or you can take some action to kind of mitigate that or like to stay awake rather than just
exactly.
like, okay, yeah, that's really helpful.
All right, so let's use another example because this one's one that's real from one of the students that has been on the internet here a couple of years ago, and that was is that he was with a history of being uptight and being on, let us say, on the spot when he would have conversations with certain people. And one of those people would be someone that this individual would identify as superior or a big person or whatever. So naturally, the boss is going to fill in. Now, he's gotten into this habit then of whenever the boss comes, that he gets really uptight,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know how to handle himself, doesn't get anything done. And when he calls, he's almost on the verge of getting fired. But after a couple of sessions and we begin to look at this and figure out what's going on, I say, okay, now the time that you need anapanasati is not when you're on the floor, it's when the boss is coming.
Mm-hmm.
The boss hasn't even gotten there yet.
Yeah,
We
you need the
almost
awareness
always
before
know
the
okay, you can see him
event.
5 seconds away. You can see him coming down the aisle. So you can take that time to get ready, to take a deep breath. And in this situation, one of the things that was happening, this student was getting really uptight in his shoulders and all tense and everything when the boss would come.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing to do then is when the boss is coming and it's time to have a conversation with the boss is to relax the body, to
Yeah.
take a few deep breaths, to get yourself ready, knowing and telling yourself that you're going to be able to handle this, that you're the boss here. So when the actual contact comes with the boss, we can be there with wisdom.
Yeah, because if we weren't awake, maybe we're dreading during that 5 minutes for like creating this mental state where we're like
Creating a
already
mental state.
upset.
Yeah, right. Or 5 seconds or whatever it is. We get ourselves all worked up, tense immediately before we need to be really relaxed. But if we're
Yeah.
wise, if we know this is happening, then we can plan on it in the future, knowing that this is a time, it's like bad feelings, 5 seconds ahead, wakey, wakey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no,
And
that's, yeah, if you can kind of expect or like if you can be more aware, then yeah, you can change like, yeah, the mental state before you're like in those difficult situations.
mhm. And so this is how, through investigation, this guy was able to understand that, yeah, he did get uptight every time he was around the boss. He decided not to behave that way anymore based upon ignorance and start acting wisely so that he, in fact, could answer the boss's questions. They could get along. They could be friends. He doesn't have to see this as an authority figure that's dangerous. He could see the boss as a good friend.
Yeah. And I
All right.
guess,
Guess what happened within the several months? The guy called back and he says, everything has been changed now. I'm not about to get fired. In fact, the boss just mentioned that he was thinking about opening a company and he wants me to be a partner.
oh, sick. Nice.
Now, wow, what a turnaround that
Yeah.
is.
And does that tie back to like the Eightfold Path and like right livelihood? So it's kind of like setting yourself up for success in a way, or like cultivating those mental states before the turbulence happens.
Yes, exactly so. Um, One of the most important qualities in the sutta that talks about right livelihood is um, about scheming, belittling, bait and switch. So it's looking at it from the sense of being a salesman.
Yeah.
But in fact, everyone is a salesman
Yeah,
if they're
sure.
employed. And so we do bait and switch. Yes, I'll do it, and then I don't.
Yeah.
Belittling the other people around. Oh, I'm better than they are. Okay. Scheming, plotting, planning, trying to set things up. This is all the stuff that has associated with right livelihood.
Yeah, those are the things that are going to make it harder to be aware. Like if you're
Hmm.
constantly wrapped up in like trying to make certain things happen because you want, well, there's like want or need implied in there.
But this right livelihood is all based upon the quality of right actions
Yeah.
and right speech anyway. That if we are engaged in right speech and right action, then our right livelihood will be right.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm. And if we are wise enough to be free from wanting, if we don't want anything, then we're probably not going to be breaking the precepts about harming people to get what we want or taking things that are not given. Almost all business is either I get an advantage over you, which means I've harmed you in some way, or that actually out and out take it from you.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Okay,
what I've seen in
that's what
business
most
anyway.
business is. In fact, one of the things that I figured out about business is that most businesses are really successful because of a windfall.
The windfall is in.
A windfall. Somebody buys something, they purchase it, they spend the money on it, and then they don't take delivery, and you've got it. That happens quite often in business.
Oh, like an unexpected, like,
An
I don't know.
unexpected windfall. All
Yeah.
right. Another example of that, and this happened recently on eBay. I buy a computer, it's got a problem. I notify eBay. The guy says he's going to send a shipping slip so that the item can be returned. He doesn't get the shipping slip. eBay refunds the money. And so now I've got $500 and the computer.
Yeah.
Okay. What will most people do with that? They'll keep the money and the computer.
Yeah.
And the other guy on the other side of the world is not
He's out
got
of
no
luck. It's at the
recourse
expense
because
of.
eBay's already made its choice.
Yeah.
But if the one who is doing this transaction recognizing that, oh well, I might be able to get that $500 and the computer, but I'll remember it, and I know
Yeah.
that this was not right livelihood, and I know that I don't need that money, and so what I do is I contact the seller and make arrangements to pay him for the computer that I've got,
Yeah. Or just mail it back to
minus
him.
the discount
Yeah.
for the problem that I found with it.
Yeah.
And that's right livelihood.
Yeah. Like not.
But it's the honorable way to do it.
Yeah. And it's because, like, yeah, you would remember that in the future. I mean,
And
and yeah,
then you
it's
can
just like all
and then you
greed.
can come on
And
internet and tell a nice story about what happened.
yeah, you could do it for Instagram.
Exactly. Yeah, I did pay the man.
Yeah.
Even though I got the computer for free, I still paid him anyway for it
Hmm.
because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So that's an example of right livelihood, is that we don't intentionally take advantage of other people.
Hmm.
Now, the reason that we would intentionally take advantage of other people is because that's what our culture is all about. We live in a capitalistic society. You're supposed to do that kind of stuff. Dog eat dog, take advantage. If
Yeah.
he can't get your money, then he can't get your money. You got his goods, he can't get your money, or vice versa. You've got his money and he can't get your goods.
Yeah. True. I mean, that's the way society's set up in a lot of
Hmm.
cases.
One of the things that happened just recently on that same regard is normally in the West, if you have a repair, like you take a computer in to repair, they're going to charge you money whether they do it or not. Here in Thailand, I actually had a computer repaired. He did what I wanted to do, but he didn't quite finish the job. But when he gave it back saying he couldn't do this, he got all this other stuff done. He couldn't do this, but then it was free of charge. He
Hmm.
couldn't do all, so he gave some and he didn't charge. What that means is that he's now going to be my favorite go-to guy to go next time.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, this is a way that businesses will build up goodwill is by going that extra mile.
Yeah. It's more fulfilling to
Good,
just be cooperative and anyway,
it's
just like have
good
good
business.
relationships with people. It's just less stressful. It's more enjoyable.
Exactly. Our
Yeah.
relationship with people is more important than our business with people,
Yeah.
but not in capitalism. Capitalism, I don't care. I've got plenty of friends. I don't need you as a friend. I'm just going to screw you.
Yeah. That's how a lot of people operate.
Hmm. But if we feel comfortable already, I don't need anything, that I'm satisfied with the way things are, then I'm not out trying to take advantage.
Yeah.
This
So we
is an
can,
excellent way of looking at what is right livelihood is when you're dealing with people honestly and you're not trying to take advantage of them at all.
yeah. So we can wake up at some point. We can say like, oh, like I don't want to take advantage of this person, or like, I don't know, like I don't want to get into this argument because that would like harm the relationship. We can choose not to act on those feelings, or like I guess wherever we are at in the chain, we can choose not to act. That's what we're practicing with Anapanasati.
Pardon?
Is that what we're practicing with Anapanasati? Is like
That's what
not
we're
like
practicing on
noticing.
Anapanasati is so that we can wake up when we need to wake up.
Yeah.
And in that sense, with the guy who was having trouble with his boss, his time, the time for him to wake up was when the boss was approaching, not when they were already in it.
Yeah. And so we can get more inputs. That's what you're saying. It's like we can not do this. And what we can do, get more inputs. You know, that person can take a big deep breath. They can like think about like I can do this, like, or like I don't have to, you know, be awkward or whatever in this conversation. We can start kind of like changing the dynamic with like that's like part of this chain of like dependent origination, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so like how do you discern, like, okay, so what I guess I've been doing, I sit down and I like try to like I'll notice like I don't feel good. And I know that before not feeling good, there's gotta be like point of contact. So I try to sort through, I guess, like whatever is in my awareness and notice like where it's coming from.
That may not be the right way of doing it because
Yeah, I
when
don't
you're
think so.
sorting through, what that means is you're just trying to figure out stuff based upon what you already have as input.
Yeah.
An example would be, in this regard, is always come back to the here now, look at what's going on around you, and recognize that things are okay now. An example with the guy, the boss is coming, but he's not here now.
Well, I guess maybe a better way of putting it would be like, okay, I know the feeling's not part of me, so I'm going to toss the feeling out. Or I'm going to let go of the feeling.
I understand the concept. I wouldn't use those terms, but yes. In other words, you are not bound to operate by your feelings. The feelings do not own you, and you are not the feelings.
Yeah. And
The
okay.
feelings are just there, and you can deal with the feelings because they're not you. If you're
Mm-hmm.
wise, if you're ignorant, then I am this feeling. I am the liking. I am the wanting. I am the clinging. I am being reborn as a self into a woeful state, and I am in pain. I
Okay.
just gave you the little sequence there, okay? And it's always the I am. But if we have wisdom at the point of contact, then that wisdom is I am not these feelings.
Okay. Okay. We can have wisdom at the point of contact and like
Mm-hmm.
say,
I,
I
I'm
am
not
not
these
these,
feelings.
I am not these feelings.
I'm not these feelings.
Okay. Um, I guess I'm just confused about where we're acting out of, because if you tell me, or like the way I understand it, when you say like, if we have wisdom at the point of contact, then I would assume that like we wouldn't want to let that go into feeling, or like we
Okay,
would want
let's
to, well,
go back to the
not let it, but
child
we would want to,
that's having a tantrum.
yeah.
The child that's having a tantrum, and what does mom do with it? If mom is ignorant, she gets angry at the child.
Mm-hmm.
She does not like the child having this tantrum. One of the things that she might do because of her own childhood is raise her arm in this fashion. You've probably seen that. This is very, very famous. This is what an adult, this is what a parent does to the child.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that? Let me give you the gesture again. Have you ever seen that?
Not for my parents. They babied
Not
me.
your parents. Okay. But parents do this.
Yeah, I've seen
You're
parents.
lucky. They didn't. Okay. What happens when the child sees that arm going up? Now the child has two problems. One is that the child didn't get that box of cereal. And number two, now the parent is threatening the child. And so the child is in fear, but they're already in a group of bad feelings. The child is actually going to have even a deeper, stronger tantrum when mom does that.
Yeah. Yeah, so we
So,
wouldn't want to take the action that would then result in suffering. And that action is raising the
exactly.
hand.
So what
So we
does
have
that arm
wisdom at the
coming
point
up
of
in the air
contact.
mean?
Okay, so that's, I feel like we're hinting at, okay, there's dependent orientation. That shows us how to get to suffering.
That shows us how we get to suffering ignorantly.
Yeah, okay, so we could see
And if we wake up to what we're doing,
suffering,
we can make a change
wisdom.
anywhere along the way.
But to escape suffering, would then we need like another, like, okay, so like, yeah, we follow ignorance like through the links of dependent orientation, we end up in suffering. Then how do we end up in non-suffering? Is there another path, or is it the same path? You kind of,
With the path
sorry,
of
is this
wisdom, then you would have, like, for instance, uh, going, the boss is coming to have a conversation. You got to talk to the boss. Normally, that's suffering.
okay,
The
but we're
tension
just
comes up.
we're
I'm
just
I'm
changing it
afraid. All
so
of
that
that.
it doesn't go into
But
full-blown
with
suffering.
wisdom, I can take a deep breath. I can tell myself I can handle this. Everything is cool. That's wisdom.
Sure,
The
but we'd still
reality
be,
is when the boss comes, he's not going to shoot you with a gun or bring out his whip and whip you.
mhm.
But we feel that way. We feel like we're being threatened when the boss comes.
Yeah, and so
And
like
so
the,
we act like we're threatened when the boss comes, which means that when we're full of feelings, we're not thinking straight. So when the boss asks us a question that we know the answer to, if we were straight, because we're full of bad feelings, we don't remember it.
okay, so I think my question, I think I get it. So like at the point of contact, we can say like, oh, like if I took this action, then like I would become anxious or worried, but I can take this, or I can choose not to take that action, and then
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't know, not
I
take
can
a
wake up,
action
I
that
can
would
take a
put me in
deep
suffering.
breath, I can recognize that this danger that I see here now is only manufactured in my own mind. The reality of the situation is that the boss is not dangerous.
Yes.
All
So
right? Or in the grocery store, when the child is having a tantrum, mom can recognize that, okay, the child is having a tantrum, it's not dangerous.
yeah, and so then we
I
wouldn't be
don't
in
have to
suffering.
shut that child up. I don't have to do this. I don't have to get all freaked out and say, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. My child is making a big noise in the grocery store. All right? Instead, we can be wise and we can say, this child wants this box of cereal right this very minute. Maybe if he had this box of cereal right this very minute, things would be okay and we can deal with the box of cereal later.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Um, yeah, I guess what I was kind of getting at is like, okay, so I guess like we could have wisdom at the point of contact, we could have wisdom at like the sense consciousness or whatever, like we could have wisdom at any
Uh,
of these stages beforehand, and then we could choose to like not take the action that would result in us going further down this chain.
or also, what we were hinting at before is that we can be aware of this sequence of events before it even starts up.
Yeah, but that's like it's like a big macro level. Yeah, that's like the bird's eye view.
We know the boss is coming. We know that when the boss comes, I get all uptight.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm going to make sure I don't get uptight when the boss comes.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of contact and the wisdom at the contact that we're talking about. Yes, it does have instantly an occurrence to it, but because we understand this sequence of events, we can see, oh, this is going to happen that point of contact is going to happen 5 seconds from now. Let me get ready for it now. And so I don't even have to have wisdom at the point of contact. It would be wisdom for the point of contact, I guess, in that regard.
Yeah. So where at what point, or like at what like level or like ability or like skillfulness, like being able to recognize that, we don't have to like take this chain, or like at what level of wisdom is like, would we be able to cultivate joy in like our ordinary lives? I guess. Do I have to? Is that
That would
a
be a
better way
point
of?
of cultivating joy. Here's the point. Yeah. When we recognize that I'm getting angry and I can see that anger, I can say, well, I'm really glad I saw that anger. If I hadn't seen it, I'd be making a big trouble, and I'm not making a big trouble.
Yeah.
So I'm right then. That's gladdening the mind at the point of contact, and therefore changing the feelings. The feelings that got me here were the feelings of anger,
Mm-hmm.
anger at that child, or fear of the boss. But now I can wake up and say, I don't have to feel angry. I don't have to feel afraid.
Yeah. Oh, and then we can cultivate joy like over
We can
time.
cultivate joy right there at that moment.
Because
I don't have to do this.
we have less inputs of like, oh, I was sad in this situation before. Like instead, we've built it up like we've added to that database or whatever, and been like, oh, like I'm happy when I talk to my boss, or like, I'm happy when I wake up
Exactly.
in the morning, things like that. Yeah, that clarifies, and that's really helpful. Yeah, I guess just like out of curiosity, I wonder like, do people have awareness like, or not awareness? People have wisdom before like point of contact, or is that like where, or is that the
Yes,
limit
we
of a
can.
meditator?
That's real wisdom. That's the really best kind of wisdom, is to see things coming.
Okay, so seeing things coming, and that's like difficult, I imagine, or like
Hmm.
very skillful. I don't know.
That's the skillfulness of it. But you can see that it's not magic.
Yeah, and it's not like you don't get benefits before you get to that point. You can still
Hmm.
choose to like respond skillfully, even if you're recognizing it later in the chain, right?
Hmm. Okay, let's use this example. Someone comes up and they're armed. They've got a gun. What's the most important thing about that gun? Where
It
is
could kill you.
pointed?
Yeah, where it's
No,
pointed, I guess.
where it's pointed. That's the important thing about the gun.
Hmm.
If the gun is in the holster, pointed at the ground or at the cop's foot or whatever, that's a safe gun. It's not pointed.
Yeah.
Okay, but if that gun is pointed, and sometimes people will be in a conversation holding a shotgun, and the shotgun is going all over the place. If you're wise, you're watching that shotgun
Hmm.
because that's dangerous. That thing may go off, but what's going to get hit is where the gun is pointed.
Hmm.
Okay, so this is what we mean by wisdom in general life: is look at how things are pointed.
Hmm. Look at how
Because
things are
if
pointed. So
right, look at the way things are
understand the
pointed. Look at
situation
how
better.
things are headed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it sounds very, very helpful. I guess just like I don't feel very happy or like joyful very regularly, or like it's not a common feeling for me, I guess. So it's just like I understand like mechanically it makes sense that yeah, like we can have wisdom at the point of contact and cultivate joy over time, but these aren't feelings that like I have. I mean, I don't mean like I like strongly but like they're not things that I experience very often. Doesn't feel like. So I guess maybe there was like part of me hoping that's like, oh, like if I notice like further in the chain, like I can notice before like I feel that or something like that, more like
Hmm.
skillfully or something.
Exactly.
And
The idea of wisdom at the point of contact is sort of like is sort of like the last resort or the last chance before we head off into dukkha.
before we're
The
yeah,
last
actually,
chance before we hand and so having wisdom in advance, knowing for instance that if I bring the child into the grocery store that we're setting up a tantrum, or knowing that when the boss is coming that I'm setting myself up for bad feelings of fear and loathing and trepidation. And so the knowledge of Paticca Samuppada basically means that we can wake up really early so that we don't have to wake up at finally the point of contact. Finally, when the boss asks you, are you finished with your project? And you go,
Yeah.
So you don't have to wait that long. You can be ready for the boss because you see him coming. You take a deep breath and you say, we're ready for him. Everything is cool, like this. Now, we can also do that. Uh, let us say that someone is either sitting in meditation or something close to that, and they do recognize that there is fear, that there is some fear inside. In other words, they do recognize it. There's a point of contact. Ah, there is fear. I feel it. That's the time then to gather new input. The
Mm-hmm.
new input is looking around. Oh, the dogs are comfortable. There's no alligators. There's no mafia. There's no big snakes. The mafia is not there. There are no cops. In other words, this is a safe environment. Why do I feel in fear? Because the input, the new input is that at this present moment, everything is safe. Let me feel
Yeah.
safe. This is safe. Okay? So this is also wisdom at the point of contact is let's go get some new information.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I get that we can have wisdom at any point, like even past point of contact, but like past that, it's kind of hard to salvage it, like, and that you're probably like pretty likely to take an unskillful action, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
kind of what you're getting at?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I imagine like I'm talking to you right now. I'm probably past the point of contact like most of the time while we're talking.
Well, it goes like this. It actually is, there's a lot going on in the mind. Many,
Yeah.
many points of contact, but many of those points of contact are not powerful enough to be a real impact to bring up a feeling.
Okay, so there is like a threshold, and
Mm-hmm.
so like I'm likely
A,
to just be
a
feeling
quantum,
nothing.
precisely. Everything is quantumized.
Okay.
There is nothing that actually is a steady state or a flow. Nothing is continuous. Everything comes and starts, fits and starts. Even the brain has alpha waves, right? We also think of it in the sense of neurons firing. So everything is a quantum.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. We found out even in particle physics, everything is quantumized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I guess just like there's a lot for me to work on that we talked about. I guess like the hardest thing for me would be that like noticing that joy. Like I don't feel like I notice that joy. It feels like very bland. Like I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be like a pity party or anything. It just feels like very bland or like um, anxiety. Like there's like a shroud of anxiety that's with me most of the time, and
Mm-hmm.
so
Uh-huh.
and I
I
would like
see you,
to,
anxiety.
yeah,
Uh-huh. I see you is better than oh no, anxiety again. Oh, I feel so much
yeah,
anxiety. It's
exactly.
no, wake up. Aha, I see you, anxiety. I know you're there.
Yeah, and like maybe I'm overthinking it, but like these things seem to have a very like small contact.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't feel like bam, I'm hit with a like train of anger or like there's a tiger in front of me. It's just like a very low point of contact that
You'd be surprised because those subtle ones do have power, and the power is generally because of the ignorance that we're going to take an action that's a big action because of a very little power of the feeling.
yeah.
Okay,
Oh wait,
that it
very little power of the feeling.
well, let us call
Oh,
it a
big
free
impact,
floating. A,
small power. Gotcha.
People call it a free floating anxiety, or that they feel like that there's anxiety there a lot.
Hmm.
In general, people will say, but it doesn't affect my behavior.
Oh, I mean it does,
But it
100%.
does. That's what I'm getting at. Because it's ignorant, it does have power. We're actually
Yeah.
taking the power out of it with wisdom.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like I feel ignorant to that anxiety. Like I don't feel like I've woken up to it being not me. And so that it makes it hard to let go of, or not let go of. It helps
That's
me,
because you don't like
yeah,
it.
because I don't like it. Yeah, I kind of shirk away from it. I don't want to look at it too
You don't want to
closely.
look at it. I don't like it. I don't like anxiety. I don't like that feeling.
Yeah,
I
so I
want to
guess
get rid of it.
what I could do would be to get more inputs.
Mm-hmm.
I could, instead of being like,
Investigate.
anxiety, be like, there's anxiety.
There's anxiety. Let's take a look at it. Let's
Yeah.
play with it. Let's see if we can move it around. Let's make it go up and make it go down, make it go sideways, turn it
Okay.
from red to green.
Yeah, so I can play with it. Yeah, I think
Play
you
with
mentioned
it.
that. We can like play with things or we can like ignore them or or forget them. I think that's what you said.
Yeah, just forget all about it or play with it.
Yeah, so I could try playing with that, but then I would have to
That's
notice it,
that's
get more
wisdom.
input. In
That
the
would be
inputs,
wisdom.
so like the inputs that I would want to get, like I guess like at that point of contact, um, would that be like sensory? It'd be like, oh, what is it? Like, what does the touch feel like? What is the temperature? Like, would it be those things? Are those the inputs that I want to get?
Right. In fact, that's quite a lot of how to say it, quite entertaining. It's a
Okay.
kind of an entertainment that most people don't. They think that they're going to have entertainment from YouTube or the laptop or watching a video or anything like that. Oh no, the human body is quite entertaining. There is
Yeah, I mean,
so much
like,
going on. It's worth looking at. It's quite
yeah,
a show.
yeah, like it could have a shape or like tactile like things. Okay, yeah, so that's we have things to play with. We can notice them, get more inputs, and I
Yeah.
guess even by just strictly getting the input. Oh yeah, the mudras. Is that what they're called? Yeah, we can get more
Hmm.
inputs. And that's like just by getting the inputs, I feel like then we're not like thinking about being
Not
anxious
thinking
or
about
being
right. We're
suffering.
actually receiving
Uh,
input rather than processing and processing and processing old stuff.
awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Yeah, I'll work on that.
All right. Well, this has been a really delightful conversation. I'm glad that you've gotten something out of it. That's great.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Um, yeah, have a good evening.
All right. We'll see you later.
Bye.